Hi, good evening. So, I want to discuss how pagans feel about the use of pagan gods in superhero movies, comic books, and so on. I got the inspiration for this topic from a discussion over on long hair forums, where a pagan person said how she felt very uncomfortable with the Avengers movie because she did not like to see her patron gods made into superheroes. Now, gods in fiction is a huge topic, and even the Christian God has made some appearances. And I think that discussing this entire topic will be too much for one YouTube video. So I'm gonna stick with gods in comic books, and in particularly the Marvel universe. And, well, as my personal opinion, I don't really mind the Marvel universe at all. Because when you look at it, what are a superhero? In their respective universes, superheroes are larger than life, extremely powerful human beings who ordinary humans call on for help whenever they need saving or they need some feat of wonder to be done, and they have become very much icons of their world. In many ways, the stories of superheroes is very similar to the old stories of gods, and the way I look at it, superhero stories very much are stories of gods just made in a modern format. So, to me, I don't think that Thor and Loki would have a problem with how Marvel has presented them, even if the Norse mythology as presented in Marvel is pretty cherry-picked. So it's not exactly, you won't learn a lot of Norse mythology by reading Thor or watching the relevant movies. But still, I don't think that these gods would have a problem with it, because in many ways, superheroes are our worlds, our times, God stories. It's our way to tell the legends of people who are larger than life, and the story of archetypes personified who run around and save people. It is, when you look at the stories of Superman or the various Marvel heroes and so on, they are not really that different from the stories of Hercules or the stories of, when you read Norse mythology, the stories of Thor, of all his various feats and deeds. Superhero stories are really not that different. They are hero stories, but in many ways it is easier for us to accept these stories presented as comic books, and often with aliens and strange scientific concoctions and cosmic rays as explanations for these individuals' godlike powers, instead of them being, well, classical gods. However, I do see how it could make someone uncomfortable to see their gods used in fiction, especially when the fiction is very incorrect when it comes to the mythology involved. I know that a lot of Christians, they become very upset when Jehovah is used in fiction, even when it's done respectfully, because they feel that it shouldn't be done that way. Even that episode of Little House on the Prairie, where oh, I've forgotten what these characters had named. Anyway, the father, he takes his son far into the middle of nowhere because the son is dying, and they sit eating soup, and there come this, and he wants to erect a shrine to God as a last-ditch effort to save his son. And suddenly this old man comes by and asks if he can have some food. And the father says, yeah, of course you can. We only have some bouillon, but you can share our food if you accept that it's simple. And the old man eats with them, and suddenly, miraculously, the young boy recovers. And it is pretty much implied that this old man is God. It's done very, very respectfully. And even that episode got quite a bit of criticism. So I think that it is natural that many pagans feel the same way, that the gods should be honored to such a degree that we should not make fiction stories of them, make new versions of them, and carry on their stories in such a way. We should rather stick to the mythologies, and if a movie is to be made about the gods, it should be a movie version of one of the existing legends. And I get that point of view, I really do. However, and here's probably me as a chaot speaking, I think that it might be very much different for a reconstructionist or someone who believe in the gods as literal, physical or perhaps spiritual, but anyway as literal, actual beings who sits and looks on. To a certain degree I do too, but I also think that the gods very much are archetypes. And as such, it is beneficial both for the gods and for their worshippers to see the gods in new stories, to have their legends updated to a language that we can understand today. Now, to me, when it comes to Marvel's Thor, I just block out. I don't see that character as having anything to do with the god Thor, because I see the connections there, I see where they have borrowed a bit of mythology, but I don't see that as any different than in Final Fantasy XIII. It is one of the characters, Lightning. She has clear connections with Thor. A name for once, she is Lightning, and when she gets a summon, her summon is a horse, which is named Odin. So she has a very connection with the Norse mythology there, but I don't really see that is anything else than using these names. And yeah, to me, I have sort of two views on it. One is from a comic book fan I don't really connect the two. They are too different. But as a pagan, I don't really see a problem with it, because Thor in the Marvel universe is a kick-ass, give no quarters, well he gives quarters, but he's a kick-ass, he's a strong, he's a willful, he's a warrior. I don't see that go against what Thor is. I would have a more problem with it if they named a character Thor, clearly based him on the god, and then did something that would clearly be against everything that god stood for. Like, for example, Artemis, who is a virgin goddess. If she were a character based on her were featured in a movie and she acted like a complete slut, I could see how that would upset me as a pagan, because that would sort of be dishonoring that character. But presenting that character in a modern piece of fiction where the gods, while their mythology might not be completely intact, their personality and what I stand for is, I don't see a problem. The way I see it, the legends and the stories told of the gods have to change if they are going to stay relevant. And by that I am not thinking about, I have a few good friends who are reconstructionists, and of course for them the situation will be different, because they are trying to reconnect with this old religion and bring that back as complete as possible. However, for the rest of us, I think it is beneficial to see these legends updated. I also think that the gods are with us everywhere we go, and to put them on a pedestal where you can never use them in fiction, you can never speak of them other than reverently in worship and so on, then we create a barrier between the gods and us. I think that by treating the gods in a more everyday way, I am not saying that you should disrespect them, of course not, but in a more everyday way, then that brings us closer to them. And I think that to use a character based on the god Thor or the god Loki in comic book or in a movie based on a comic book, I think that actually helps to create that bridge, to sort of bring the gods that back into relevance for many people, where these archetypes in a way have lost meaning for them because they can no longer relate to the old stories, which takes place in a time so far removed from ours. And I also think that by not always being completely reverent about the gods, but being able to joke about them, being able to create new stories about them, then we sort of make them more approachable. And to me, I don't think that the gods necessarily are like us, flesh and blood, and I don't think they have a being that we can necessarily understand. One of the reasons why we personify them as beings, give them human appearances, and basically treats them like very powerful but very human-like, is because that makes it easier for us to connect with them. And I think that we shouldn't forget this reason. And I think that for a lot of people, seeing their gods in fiction actually makes it easier to connect with them. It continues that process of making the gods more accessible. Now again, I'm not saying that if you are disturbed by the Avengers or the Thor movie or the Marvel comic books about Thor or anything else that uses the gods in fiction, I'm not saying that your feeling is wrong, because it's your religious life and you have to be the judge of what is right for you. So please don't take this video as an indication that I think that you are wrong in your opinions. If enjoying such fiction is wrong for you, and if you see it as a disrespect to the gods, by all means, stick to your opinions, because those are right for you. But for me, I see superhero stories very much in the same way that the stories of Hercules or the stories of the other demigods and so on. I see very much many similarities between them, and I think that they very much serve the same place in society as those older stories did in their time. That's not saying that these older stories are irrelevant. They're great stories, but I also like to see the idea of the supernatural human being, or the superpowered person, so to speak, presented in a modern view as well. So yeah, I personally do not think that the Avengers and so on are disrespectful to the gods. And I think that some people might watch these movies and then get curious about Norse mythology, and that might lead them into a more deep understanding of the mythology, and they might see past those little cherry-picked bits mixed with complete fabrication on behalf of the creators of the comic book and the movie, and they might actually study the mythology itself. But in either case, I personally don't see anything wrong with it. But I would very much like to hear what other pagans have to say about the gods used in comic books and in movies and in general popular fiction, which is not necessarily based in the legends that we usually learn about them from. So yeah, I hope you have a great evening and a great weekend. Blessed be.